Obinna entered the room quietly. The storm outside made it hard to see. "Chioma," he whispered. "It's me." A woman reached out and held his hand. She said nothing, but she didn't stop him. Her skin felt warm, familiar. He smiled and kissed her gently. That night, in the darkness, he gave her everything. But when the sun rose and he turned to face her, it wasn't his wife, it was his mother. Obinna was 29 years old, tall and well-built, with deep eyes that always looked serious, even when he smiled. He had been raised in a powerful Igbo family, where tradition was more important than anything. His father, Papa Reze, was a respected elder in the village, strict, proud, and feared. His mother, Mama Oluchi, was the opposite, soft-spoken, graceful, and deeply spiritual. She had been the quiet backbone of the household for over 30 years, and everyone in the village praised her for her patience and poise. Obinna had married Chioma only 6 months ago. She was young, beautiful, and came from a wealthy family in the nearby town. She was bold, confident, and never afraid to speak her mind. While Obinna loved her, their marriage wasn't perfect. Chioma had noticed the closeness between Obinna and his mother, and though she never said it out loud, something about it made her uncomfortable. She didn't grow up with the same customs, and she found some village traditions hard to accept. In their village, Umudim, the elders held tight control over every family, especially those with status. There were rules for everything. How a wife must dress, where she could sit, when she could speak. Newly married couples were expected to respect ancient customs, no matter how strange or uncomfortable they seemed. Chioma, being a modern woman, often questioned these rules, and that created tension between her and Mama Oluchi. Behind closed doors, Chioma had started keeping secrets. She didn't trust her mother-in-law's calm smile. She once told her best friend, "That woman pretends to be gentle, but I know she's hiding something. She watches Obinna too closely." Obinna, on the other hand, thought Chioma was simply being jealous. He never imagined that the woman he loved and the mother who raised him would ever stand on opposite sides in his life. The night was heavy with rain. It poured so hard that the sound of thunder felt like it was coming from inside the walls. The power had been out since evening. Obinna lay on his bed, staring at the darkness. He wasn't allowed to be near his wife tonight, thanks to the village's cleansing tradition. Married couples had to sleep apart during the ancestral ritual, a rule he found both unnecessary and cruel. He missed Chioma, her soft breathing, the way she curled into his chest. He couldn't take it anymore. He got up quietly, barefoot, and walked through the hallway. It was pitch black, but he knew the layout of the house. The women were staying in the left wing. He counted the doors like he always did. 1, 2, 3. He believed this was her room. He opened the door gently. The room smelled like shea butter and warm skin. A woman was lying on the bed, her back facing him. She didn't move. "Chioma," he whispered softly. No response. But when he stepped closer, the woman shifted slightly as if welcoming him. That was enough. Obinna removed his wrapper and slipped under the blanket beside her. The warmth of her body pulled him in. He placed his hand gently on her waist. There was no resistance. Her skin was smooth, familiar. He kissed her shoulder, slowly, letting his lips rest there. Still, she said nothing. But her breathing had changed. She was aware, awake, and still, she didn't stop him. Obinna moved closer. His hand traveled across her stomach, and she held his wrist, lightly. Not to stop him, just to feel him. It was dark, but it felt real. It felt right. I missed you, he whispered again, pressing his forehead to her neck. He touched her like he always did, with the kind of love only a husband should know. She didn't say a word. There was a pause in the middle. She turned, her face away. He didn't see it. He thought maybe she was shy. When it was over, he kissed her softly and wrapped his arms around her. She trembled once, then nothing. They both lay still, the sound of the rain outside slowly washing over them. Obinna fell asleep, thinking he had found peace in his wife's arms. The rooster crowed just as the first light of dawn touched the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet soil and silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt too quiet, too thick. Somewhere in the women's wing, a scream broke the silence. It was sharp, high-pitched, and filled with horror. Obinna opened his eyes slowly, confused at first. The blanket felt heavy on his skin. The room was warm, but something wasn't right. The woman beside him was still. She hadn't moved all night. Another scream followed, this time closer. Obinna sat up. He looked at the woman lying next to him. Her back was still turned, her body was stiff, not in sleep, but in shame. Slowly she turned her face toward him, and in that moment, everything inside him collapsed. It was not Chioma, it was his mother. Obinna stumbled out of the bed like something had bitten him. His knees hit the floor. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Mama Oluchi sat up slowly, her wrapper still tangled around her waist, her eyes hollow, her lips trembling. She didn't speak either. There was nothing to say. The door burst open. One of the female relatives, Ugochi, stood there with a basin in her hands, ready to fetch Mama Oluchi for morning cleansing. The basin dropped from her hands. Water splashed across the floor. She screamed so loud the entire house rushed to the hallway. Chioma came running, her hair wrapped in a scarf, her face worried. What happened? What's going on? Then she saw Obinna. He was shirtless, standing in the middle of the room. His eyes were red. His chest was rising and falling, like he couldn't breathe. And then she looked past him. She saw Mama Oluchi, sitting on the bed, her wrapper still undone, her body exposed in a way no sun should ever see. Chioma covered her mouth with both hands. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Obinna tried to reach for her. Chioma. I didn't know. But she stepped back like he was fire. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from betrayal, but from disgust. You touched me last night. You were in my dream. I thought it was real, because I felt you too. The crowd gathered outside the room. Whispers turned to gasps. Some covered their mouths. Others backed away, shaking their heads. Papa Ease pushed through the people, his walking stick banging against the floor. What is this noise? He looked inside the room. He saw his wife, his son, the undone bed, the open wrappers. The silence. His mouth dropped. His eyes didn't blink. Obinna lowered his head like a boy caught stealing food. But this wasn't food. This was a curse. Papa Eze raised his staff and slammed it on the floor. You have brought shame to this house, to this blood, to this land. Mama Oluchi finally spoke. Her voice was broken, barely above a whisper. I knew it wasn't her, she said, her voice shaking. I knew it was him. But I froze. I couldn't stop him. I was afraid. No one moved. No one breathed. The room went silent, except for the sound of Chioma's footsteps as she walked away. And this time, she didn't look back. The house remained quiet that afternoon. Not out of peace, but because no one knew what to say. No one had ever seen something like this. Not in this generation. Not in the one before. Some elders whispered that this was more than a mistake. It was a spiritual disaster. Chioma sat outside the compound under the mango tree, her hands gripping her wrapper, her eyes locked on nothing. Her face was swollen from crying, but she made no sound. People came to comfort her, to ask questions, but she waved them off. She didn't want their pity. What she needed was to understand how the man she loved, the man who had promised to protect her, could betray her in a way she couldn't even describe out loud. She thought back to the night before, the strange warmth in her dream, the sudden flutter in her chest when she had felt a presence in the dark. She thought it was Obinna's spirit, visiting her. Now she realized it was his body, just not with her. He touched another woman, and it was his own mother. She whispered it to herself, and the words sounded like poison. Inside the main house, Papa Ease had gathered the elders. He stood at the center of the room, his face stiff, his voice shaking. Not from fear, but from rage he couldn't contain. My son has defiled his own blood. My wife has allowed herself to be used like a stranger in the dark. This is not just a family. Shame! This is an abomination. The elders nodded in silence. One of them, Elder Madhu, said, "This was no ordinary mistake. The spirits have been angered. The ancestors will not stay quiet. You must perform a cleansing ritual for the house and for the womb." Papa Eze turned to Obinna, who sat in the corner of the room, head bowed, eyes red. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked. Obinna couldn't answer. His throat felt dry, like it was filled with sand. He wanted to cry, but he couldn't. His shame had turned into something heavier than grief. "I didn't know," he finally said. "I thought it was Chioma." Papa Easy slammed his cane against the floor. "You thought? You thought your mother was your wife? What kind of son does not know the body of the woman who gave him life?" Across the house, Mama Oluchi sat alone in her room. The windows were shut, the room dark, the air thick with silence. Her wrapper was neatly tied. Now, her hair was covered, but her soul was falling apart. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't spoken to anyone but the wall in front of her. She kept replaying the moment in her head. The voice she recognized but didn't stop. The touch she didn't refuse. The breath she allowed to rest on her skin. She had felt his hand, and she knew. And still, she froze. "Why didn't I scream?" she whispered. "Why didn't I push him away?" The truth was simple. She had been too ashamed, too confused, too paralyzed by the fear of what stopping him would mean. She had chosen silence, and silence had destroyed everything. By evening, Chioma had packed her things. She stood at the compound gate, her eyes dry now. Obinna came running, barefoot, no shirt, begging her not to leave. "Please, Chioma, I didn't mean to. I swear on my life, I didn't know. Don't let this end us." Chioma looked at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. Then she said something that stuck to his bones forever. "You were my husband. Now, you're just your mother's mistake." She walked away without another word, and once again, no one stopped her. Night fell fast in the village, and the wind carried whispers that didn't come from mouths. The elders called for the priest before the sun had even set. Not just any priest, but Dibia Okoye, the old seer who rarely left the forest shrine unless the spirits themselves demanded it. When he arrived, the air changed. It felt colder, still. Obinna stood before him with his head bowed. Mama Oluchi sat wrapped in white cloth, her eyes on the floor. Papa Iz, too proud to cry, sat on the wooden stool outside the hut, gripping, his staff so hard his knuckles turned white. Dibia Okoye placed a small clay bowl on the ground and dropped white powder into it. He lit a flame and spoke in a language older than the village itself. Everyone around held their breath. When the fire turned blue, he opened his eyes slowly. "The ancestors are not silent," he said. Everyone leaned in. This union was not just flesh to flesh. It was blood to blood, life to life, and now something has been created that cannot be erased. Obinna lifted his head. "What do you mean?" The priest turned to him with eyes that no longer looked human. "Your mother carries life, Obinna." Gasps exploded from every corner of the compound. One woman fainted. Papa Ize dropped his staff. "No!" he shouted. "It's not possible." But Mama Oluchi didn't move. She just closed her eyes. She already knew. Her body had been speaking to her for days. Strange warmth in her belly, dreams that felt like warnings, whispers in her sleep. She had ignored them, hoping the shame would be the worst of it. But now the truth stood in front of her. She was pregnant with her son's child. The priest stepped back and poured water over his hands. "This child is not cursed by human hands, but it is born from a broken circle. If it is not handled properly, the curse will live in this bloodline forever." Obinna fell to his knees. Please tell me what to do." Dibia Okoye stared into the fire. "Leave the village, both of you. Go far. The land does not want this seed. The gods have turned their faces. If you stay, misfortune will bury this family." Pathizi stood suddenly, voice shaking, pride shattered. "Take them! Take this shame away from my house." Obinna turned to his mother, the woman who had raised him, and now carried his child. She looked at him, her face a mix of guilt, grief, and something else. Resignation. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply stood up, and just like that, they were banished. No farewell, no final words, no chance to make it right. The village gates closed behind them before the moon rose, and above them, the sky stayed silent. But the curse had already begun. 18 years passed like a slow-burning fire. Quiet, but always there. Obinna never returned to the village. After the night of their exile, he and Mama Oluchi had disappeared into the forests near the southern border, where no one knew their names and no one asked questions. They lived in silence, not as mother and son, not as lovers, just as two broken people, joined by shame and bound by blood. Mama Oluchi gave birth to a girl. She named her Ezene, meaning good mother, perhaps hoping to rewrite her story through the child. The baby was quiet, calm, with wide, deep eyes that always seemed to be watching. As she grew, villagers from nearby towns said she was beautiful, almost too beautiful. Her skin was smooth like silk, her voice soft like river water, and her gaze unnerving. Obinna loved her, but he kept his distance. He never called her daughter. Something in him could never cross that line, but at night he would sit near her door just to hear her breathing. That sound reminded him there was still something human left in him. Mama Oluchi never smiled again. When Ezine turned 18, she started asking questions. Why do we live so far from people? Why don't I have a father? Why does mother cry when she thinks I'm asleep? Obinna told her nothing. Mama Oluchi fell ill soon after. Her body, worn down by years of silence and sorrow, gave in. She died quietly one morning, her hand holding a faded wrapper soaked in tears. They buried her near the riverbank, under a tree that had never grown fruit. After her death, Obinna didn't know what to do. He wandered, lost. Sometimes he thought of walking into the river and letting it all end. But he couldn't. Something pulled him back, Ezine had grown into a woman now. 18. Calm, quiet, always watching him with the same eyes he once feared. He had raised her, fed her, protected her, but had never truly looked at her. One evening, returning from the market, he saw her standing barefoot at the edge of the river, her scarf floating in the breeze. The sunset hit her face in a way that made time stop. Her posture, her presence. Something about it felt too familiar. She turned slowly. Her face was soft, her eyes, those same wide watching eyes, locked with his. And in that moment, Obinna stopped breathing. She smiled, but it wasn't a greeting. It was the same smile Mama Oluchi used to give him when he was a child. Warm, knowing, and dangerous. "Papa," she said softly. Obinna's knees weakened, not because of the word, but because in her eyes, he saw a shadow that wasn't hers. A reflection of a woman he had loved, betrayed, buried, and perhaps never truly left behind. The curse had not ended. It had simply changed its face. Who was truly to blame? Obinna or his mother? Was it a mistake or something darker? Tell us what you would have done.